Here we go on our Tuesday edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. And we're going to talk a little bit of Baker Mayfield today as we await news on what will happen with Deshaun Watson. As we're recording this, Watson is going through his disciplinary hearing. It's expected to last into Wednesday, and then we just sort of play the waiting game. We could get news this week, next week. Who knows? We're sort of on pins and needles for this Deshaun Watson news. And it's important. It affects not just the Browns, but really the entire league. So everybody's sort of waiting this out. So until then, we're going to talk a little bit of Baker Mayfield, because today Baker Mayfield spoke to the media at his youth camp for the first time. This is, I think, the first time he's talked since that podcast. I don't recall him doing like any real media availability at his statue unveiling. So this is really the first we've heard from Baker, and maybe the most definitive we've heard from him about the situation with the Browns. So I'm going to read the quote, and this comes from Carrie Murdoch of Sooner Scoop. And of course, you can find all of this info in Mary Kay's story on cleveland.com/Browns. Baker said, quote, when he was asked if he thinks he could start for the Browns if Deshaun Watson is suspended for the year, quote, "No, I think for that to happen, there would have to be some reaching out, but we're ready to move on, I think, on both sides." And then at another point, he said, "I think it's been pretty obvious the mutual decision on both sides is to move on." And he says he's thankful for his 4 years in Cleveland. Says all the nice things about Cleveland after that. Mary Kay, when you saw this, what was your initial thought?
Well, you know what? It didn't really sound to me or seem to me like he's leaving this enormous door open to be able to come back and play for the Browns. I think he's trying to kind of tread a little bit lightly, but still say what we all know, that both sides are ready to move on. Both sides need this to be over. He's waiting for word that he's been traded somewhere, and then he's going to have a new playbook in his hands and maybe even start against the Cleveland Browns on opening day in Carolina on September 11th. But as far as the reaching out part, if you really read that quote over again, he didn't say who he thought the reaching out was going to have to be done by. It was interpreted as that the Browns were going to have to come reaching out to him, but he didn't really say that, did he? I mean, it says, do you have it right up there, Dan? Can you read it one more time?
He says, "No, I think for that to happen, there would have to be some reaching out.
Right.
But we're ready to move on, I think, on both sides."
Right. So, I mean, we assume that he's saying the Browns would have to sort of reach out to me and talk to me about that. Not that he's got much say in the matter, but I mean, maybe he'd have to do the reaching out himself. So yeah, I didn't view this as, hey, let's put our heads together and see if we can't get something going here.
Ashley, what were your thoughts when you saw these quotes start to trickle out?
Yeah, to kind of build off of what Mary Kay said, like my thoughts were the way it was phrased was like, never say never, like type of thing. Like he didn't leave a huge opening there, obviously, and clearly said he's like ready to move on. But at the same time, I'm like, the door might be cracked a little bit, and I just wonder like what it would take for that reaching out to actually occur. And a big topic of conversation on social media and things like that has been, if hypothetically Deshaun Watson is serving out a year-long suspension and the Browns can't really easily execute a trade involving Baker Mayfield, then would it be best, and we've said it on this podcast, in theory, besides all the feelings around it, it might be best for both parties if Baker Mayfield was then your answer. So I don't know what it would take to make that happen, but my first thought was, like the door wasn't completely slammed shut. Like Baker was very, I don't know, like if respectful is like the right word necessarily with the right connotation, but he didn't totally slam it shut for me, which I did think was, a modicum of interestingness from him.
Crazier things have happened in this league. Crazier, like, oh, that'll never happen things have actually happened. I mean, there's like, it might be like 0.0001%, but there is some tiny scenario where Baker Mayfield could start again for the Browns, although as unrealistic as it is.
Yeah, I mean, let's just establish it's unrealistic. It's highly unlikely. He doesn't want it to happen. They don't want it to happen. I do think he probably will be traded before training camp, and this will be a moot point over the next couple of weeks, probably. So I just don't think it's going to be that much of an issue, but it does, this doesn't change anything. What Baker said doesn't change anything. The possibility has always existed that if they don't execute the trade and that doesn't work out right, he could still land on the roster and be considered quality depth. Does that mean that he'll actually play? You never know. I mean, at this point, again, highly unlikely, but what if they decide, okay, Baker's on the roster and Jacoby Brissett is the starter and he gets injured? So you can never say never. Can never say never. We never thought Josh Gordon was showing back up here. There was a never with Derek Anderson once, and he came back here. You know, I mean, crazy things do happen. But I really don't think that this interview means that, oh, geez, Baker's kind of considering maybe he'll play for the Browns again, and they're going to be so excited about that. No, he doesn't have say in the matter. He has no leverage here. He can't decide what he wants to do. If they decide that he's going to play games, then he plays games for them.